Let's dive right into it. And let's start with Cheri and then we'll go to Elle. Why art infusion? Why did you make this, both of you, why did you make this more or less a passion of yours?
Well, when I started working at Crayola 38 years ago, the company already had a long history of working with art educators, which is great. But my background was child development. And then my master's was in elementary education as a content matter generalist. And I realized that the bigger opportunities were to inspire non art teachers to adopt creative teaching and learning practices. And I've had many interesting opportunities throughout my career to work with transdisciplinary teams and those who didn't focus on art for art's sake or art techniques. And they became the strongest advocates for infusing art into the subject areas, as you just said, John. For example, I served on the National Child Development Council board, and I found that international educators were adopting the Reggio Emilia approach to teaching, which is a community in Italy. Perhaps you're familiar with the approach. It's often called the 100 languages of childhood. And they view young children as the masters of their own learning when their intuitive languages are honored. That's drawing, sculpting, singing, performing, dramatizing, painting. Memorizing is not one of the 100 languages of children that they naturally embrace, nor is sitting at a desk for many hours. So the Reggio Emilia educators point out that wherever and whenever teachers lean into those 100 languages where children will naturally excel and develop, we help them learn in the most natural and personally meaningful ways. Later, went on to become the vice chairperson of the Partnership for 21st Century Learning. And we focused on preparing students to be future ready. Interesting? It was the same approach. Now, this organization didn't call it the 100 languages of childhood. We boiled it down to the essence called 4 C's: creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. These are the exact four main benefits of infusing the arts into all content, just like you spoke of, John. During the Obama administration, I served on Michelle Obama's President's Committee for the Arts and Humanities, and we launched the Turnaround Schools initiative. Michelle Obama personally believed in the power of art to transform schools, not just to beautify schools, but to fundamentally fix what was holding them back. We took a dozen of the lowest performing elementary schools across the nation and provided a deep infusion in the arts: visual, dance, music, theater. Those students' reading scores went up 12.6%, and their math scores went up 22.5%, outperforming any other school improvement grant schools. All of the non-art teacher collaborations that I've had have convinced me that the real magic is stepping out of the art studio and using what we know about the arts across the entire curriculum.
And I love that, Cheri. And we're gonna hopefully have time to go back and maybe delve into a little bit more what some of the actions were at those grant schools and why those schools perhaps saw the gains that they saw academically. Elle, how about you? Now, you're a science teacher. So where is this art interest coming from?
So there are really two sources for my interest in art, and one of them is the fact that I've always taught chemistry, which is a core class. And the fundamental problem of a core class is that you have a very wide audience, and all of these students have fundamentally different career interests as well as hobbies. So if you decide to execute a lesson in a certain way, you're only going to capture, like, let's say 30 or 40% of the students if you're lucky. So unless you constantly vary your strategies, you're going to consistently miss out on certain subsets of your students. And what I noticed is that some of my students would doodle in class, or they would tell me about their art classes, and they were incredibly talented. I would walk by the library and I would see their paintings in the window, and I'd be like, oh, you made that. That's so cool. And so I started thinking to myself, so how can I incrementally make small changes? Because I was a first year teacher at the time, so I was quite overwhelmed. How can I make small changes to make the curriculum more approachable to people that have more creative and artistic interests? And so it started really small. It started like, can we take an abstract concept like covalent bonding and like personify it as a superhero or a cartoon character? And then it gradually evolved into more serious experiments. And one of my favorite ones is when my chemistry class does baking. So baking is, I guess it's not a traditional art like painting or sketching, but I think it requires a lot of creativity. And the cool thing about baking is that it's all about proportions. So you can teach things like dimensional analysis. How do you convert between different units? How can you count the number of molecules in like the different ingredients that you're using? And how can you perfect that recipe and create an amazing baked good? So that's sort of my favorite execution of how I did art with my chemistry class, but there's many other kinds. So that was one aspect. And the other aspect is I was trained to be a teacher in UTeach, which is a program at UT Austin. And one of their big emphasis points was the maker philosophy. So according to the maker philosophy, people learn best when they're creating things, and it's very collaborative, and you're essentially making something tangible. And traditionally, the maker philosophy is, oh, let's make circuit boards or let's customize Arduinos. And I wanted to sort of drift away from that. Like, I really love that and respect that, but I wanted to drift away and look at other forms of making. Like, we could make household goods or we could sew and crochet. So those two influences, my own students, as well as some of the preparation that I had in UTeach, were critical for me to incorporate art.